Hello, so this video is all about how I'm planning to rebuild my houseplant collection. So I'll be talking about where I'm thinking of placing plants and what plants I'm planning to go for. I also wanted to talk a little bit about my plant journey from when I started collecting plants to where I am now, because I feel like my attitude and my approach to houseplant collecting has really changed and grown over time as I've changed as well. I thought it'd be fun to take a trip back down memory lane and see where I started and how I ended up to where I am. So if you're newer here, you can learn a little bit about my lore. And if you've been here for a while, this could be a nice and fun recap of my plant journey. And if you're not interested in the backstory, you can skip ahead. But I feel like this will give you an idea of my philosophy towards plants and how I'm going forward in rebuilding my collection today. So I've always had plants in my life. My dad was really into gardening. We also had fish tanks, and then my grandparents in Vietnam are farmers. So I've just had plants around me pretty much my entire life. But it wasn't until I went to college and I had my own space for the first time in my college dorms where I got into houseplants. Nothing crazy. I had an asparagus fern, a pothos, and a jade plant. The asparagus fern died really quickly, but I was able to keep the pothos and the jade plant alive. And I realized I kind of had a green thumb in a way. Like I was able to care for these plants and I was a bit intuitive in how to take care of them. And people would ask me for plant advice and plant help in the dorms. So I was like, this is something I'm kind of good at. So I was always very casual with my plant collection throughout college up until my senior year. That's when 2019, 2020 COVID lockdown happened, and I really got into houseplants and planted aquariums and terrariums. It was crazy. So we moved into a house with other roommates, and so Chris and I had our own room, and I decked that room out in plants and aquariums. So the furniture pieces we had in there, we had a bed, we had a beanbag, and everything else was just for plants. I even had a folding table where I had a grow light hanging above it. I had plants on top of the folding table, and then I was like, wait, there's a room underneath the folding table. Let me put grow lights under there and then put more plants underneath the table. Like that, I don't know what I was on at that point, but that was crazy. And then we had another shelf, a huge like industrial shelf that had like 9 aquariums at one point. And then we had other shelves with more plants. So that room was like 80% plants, 20% living space. And I don't know how Chris put up with that. Like at that time, it felt very normal to me, but that was crazy. That was the height of my plant mania. I was just super into only growing the plant. Like that's where I got all of the joy out of, was just growing plants and watching them grow and making them get bigger and propagating them. And at that time, I only really focused on aroids, so like philodendron and monstera and some anthuriums and stuff like that. Once I graduated college in 2021, we moved to Los Angeles, and that was the first time I really had a lot of space. So I lived with Chris and then 2 other roommates, but they let me kind of occupy a lot of the shared space with my plants, because luckily they liked them, I'm pretty sure. At that house, I was able to explore with so many different plants. And I got into platycerium, I got into outdoor gardening, I got into codex plants, succulents, just so many other things that I wasn't really into before. And then I remember there was a point in time, I'm not really sure when it happened, but I started to take more interest in aesthetics and displays and interiors. So I wanted to blend my houseplants in with the interior. Instead of making a space for my plants, make a living space for me, and then have plants be additional, that they add value into the space rather than centering the entire room just for my plants. So I started getting into plant placements and mixing certain pots with plants and really thinking about the aesthetics of individual plants, but also how they interacted with the room and the interior and the furniture and also the other plants around them. It was also at this time when I kind of realized I have too many houseplants, because it was really fun for a while, but I think having so many plants is just unsustainable for me. Like I can't keep up with the constant care, because you have to repot them, you have to fertilize them, you have to give them taller moss poles. It's just like an endless cycle of growing them bigger and then cutting them down. And I just kind of realized that I couldn't keep up with this, so I started to downsize my collection a little bit. I mean, I still had a ton of plants. Like if you go through my previous plant tour videos, I think I still had like over 100 plants at that apartment, including the balcony plants. But I definitely like became a lot more mindful of what plants I was collecting, because back when I was in college, I was just like, I want to collect every philodendron possible, which is impossible because there's so many philodendron out there. So I started to be a lot more thoughtful about each plant I brought in, and I tried to get plants that didn't give the same thing as other plants. So for example, I wouldn't have like multiple pothos varieties that are just different colors. I would get one pothos variety and that would be enough for me. At that apartment too, it was my first outdoor gardening experience on the balcony, and I had so much fun gardening on the balcony. It was just a lot easier to take care of the plants because you don't have to worry about grow lights or lighting as much, and it was a lot easier to water because I would just like spray all of the plants at once, and I didn't have to take each individual pot and then water it. And then after my roommates moved out, Chris and I, we had the apartment to ourselves, and I really started to get a lot more into interiors. I was consuming more interior content on YouTube and also going on Pinterest more, trying to create a nice space for us because that was the first time that Chris and I ever had our own space just for ourselves. So I started getting into like decorating the living room and decorating the bedroom. So that made me think even more about my plants aesthetically and how do plants fit into interiors. So then I became a lot more thoughtful about what pots I was pairing with the plants, but also how the pots worked with the furniture and with the space. Since we're talking about pot and plant displays, I feel like now is a good time to talk about the sponsor of this video, which is Palmstreet. I got this pot from Palmstreet, which is a live shopping app and marketplace for plants, ceramics, and unique home crafts. The app allows you to talk directly with sellers, which makes for a really unique shopping experience where you feel like you're speaking directly to a local small business owner. A couple months back, I commissioned this pot from an amazing ceramicist named Kitoy, and I got this made specifically for my Operculicaria pachypus that I had. Unfortunately, we lost the Operculicaria in the fire, but it was really fun speaking with Kitoy on the live stream because I showed him my plant and then we came up with ideas for the design of the pot, and also he thought of the dimensions that would best complement the shape of the plant. So that was really fun. I learned a lot about him, which makes this pot even more special. And he actually lives near where my hometown is, and not many people come from that area, so it was pretty cool. So unfortunately, I lost the Operculicaria, but luckily this pot wasn't finished yet, so he was able to ship it to this apartment that we're in now. So now I just need to find the perfect plant for this pot, and I'm definitely still thinking of getting a Codex plant, so I'm keeping my eye out on Palmstreet. Palmstreet values inclusion, and they want it to be a space for any type of seller, whether you're a small local home brand or you're a nationwide business. And Palmstreet doesn't gatekeep its platform based on different interests or size requirements. So yeah, thank you so much to Palmstreet for sponsoring this video, and thank you so much to Kitoy for making me this super cool large pot. I really want to find a plant for this. I'm thinking of like a Dracaena gigas. I think that would be nice. Okay, so near the end of our lease at that apartment, I realized I wanted a few things for our next home. So I wanted to live somewhere that had a little bit of character, some charm to it, like in the architecture of the home, because I was really getting into interiors. So I wanted an inspiring space to create our next home. And then I also wanted outdoor space because I just really loved balcony gardening. So either like a balcony or a little plot of land for a garden. So that's how we ended up at our previous home that we were just at. And that's like another story how we ended up at that exact home. But that's like another story to go into. We found the most beautiful home and most beautiful property. I remember when we first viewed it, it was like walking into a little secret garden or like a slice of heaven in LA County. I've never really seen anything like that before. It was like 10 degrees cooler inside of the property than it was outside because of all of the huge old trees that were all scattered around the property. So it was like you're always under dappled light, which was so beautiful. Once we moved in, I was just so inspired by the garden and the house itself. Like it really felt like such a special and magical place that was just perfect for us. So when we moved all of my plants in, they were just scattered around everywhere because I didn't really have a place to put them, because at the other apartment, I had a spot for every plant, but now moving into this new space with different layout, I didn't have a space for every plant. So for a few months, they were just scattered around. And then it kind of got to a point where I was like, I should just really curate my collection down to plants that I really love, that I feel like a special connection to. You know, I kind of Marie Kondoed it where I'm like, does this plant bring me joy? So I gave a lot of plants away to my family, mostly my dad, and then I gave away plants to my friends like Jahao and then some other plant friends that I have. Got really into interiors at that house. A lot of my content started to include home updates and how I'm decorating the house. And because of that, I even thought more and more about how am I adding these plants in the space in a way that brings value to it. So I still loved growing plants, but I found that a lot of the joy that I get from plants is also the aesthetic value and how you can create a cool display and how you can make the plants look nice. So yeah, I started really curating down my inside houseplant collection. And then because we had all of the garden space, I honestly found like a new passion with plants and gardening for a couple of reasons. So what I love about gardening is just how the plants outside interact with the natural environment around us. It interacts with the plants, with the weather, with the microorganisms in the soil, with animals like squirrels and gophers, which are so annoying, but you know, they're part of our world, and then how they interact with birds and bugs, and how you can plant plants that are beneficial for native pollinators and birds. And it gives me like, outdoor gardening gives me an excitement that I don't fully get with indoor gardening. I feel like houseplants, in a way, it's like you're growing plants in a sterile-ish environment where it doesn't really interact with anything. But I think that like the way that plants outside interact with the world just adds another layer of interest when it comes to plant keeping. And outdoor gardening, it comes with its own challenges, but having a lot of plants outdoors versus having a lot of plants indoors is a bit easier, I think, because it's easier to water. They grow a lot faster. You don't have to worry about grow lights. And they also change with the seasons, which I think is super, super interesting. Also, something that I experienced with having a lot of indoor plants is that I would always see them around the house, and it would be like constant reminders of things that I need to do, whether it's like I need to water them or I need to fertilize them. It would just always be like, oh, I need to get on that. And it would be a visual reminder of an endless to-do list that I had. So yeah, don't get me wrong, I still love growing plants just to grow them. Like that was my 2020 self, was just focused on growing plants. But as the years have gone by and as I've gone into interiors, I've shifted a little bit towards the aesthetic of plants, and growing plants just to grow them is totally valid. It's just, in my experience, it's not a sustainable hobby for me to have like hundreds of plants. Oh, and I really wanted to share something with you. So this book, this is a collection of poems and essays by Hildegard Flanner. And what's really cool, I've never really shared this with you because I've kind of been keeping it to myself, but Hildegard Flanner, she was the original owner of our home. So she's a poet, and she lived there with her husband, Frederick Monhoff, who's an architect. And Frederick Monhoff actually built the homes that were on the property. So cool. I believe they were built in the 40s. Hildegard Flanner, she wrote all about the property and the garden, and she was in love with plants. So on the back it says, "I'm devoted to plants," writes Hildegard Flanner, "and have given a great deal of my life to them, but I'm not a botanist. I am at the mercy of plants." And she actually has so many poems and an essay that's dedicated to the property. And it's so cool to read about the place that I was living in and that I lived in from the perspective of the person who originally created it. So she would talk a lot about the plants that she planted there, and also the bamboo that she planted. So she was really into like planting exotic plants. So she planted a lot of invasive species, honestly. Like, she loved bamboo. She had over 100 varieties of bamboo. You know, bamboo is actually pretty invasive, but it is cool to read about it in her stories because I saw that bamboo on the property. Like, you've seen it too. In our front garden, there's like a whole wall of bamboo that she probably planted. So the fact that the garden was documented all these years ago really made the garden such a special place to me. And I also just realized I really love gardening. Like, I was so excited for spring. And the day that I'm filming this is the first day of spring. And I was just so excited to see all of the plants that I planted. I had bulbs, I had flowering plants, and I really felt like I was just getting the hang and getting into the groove of gardening. And yeah, I was excited to see how everything would grow this season. Yeah, I guess next, what happened was the fire happened and the garden burned and all of my houseplants burned down. And there's still so many plants that I think about, like my Dracaena reflexa, my Dracaena gigas, my Witchia mirabilis, my Philodendron firebird. Because I curated my collection down to such a small amount relative to what I used to have, those plants were really, really special to me, and some that I've had for like 5 or 4 or 6 years, and they've been with me most of my adult life post-college, so I feel like they're my little babies that I've taken care of, that have grown alongside me. So it does like make me a bit emotional when I think about my plants. I think my plants and stuff are like the material thing that I'm most sad about losing in the fire. So now that we're up to date with my plant journey, let's talk about my current philosophy and approach towards plants. So I don't really have much interest right now in rushing into getting a bunch of plants. I want to be intentional and thoughtful about what we're bringing into the space. We have a much smaller space now, and so we're limited in where we can put the plants. And over the years, I realized that I want to value my living space and the space for people over the space for plants. So first I want to finish like furnishing, not like completely finished, but have a good idea of where everything's going to go for humans and for pets before I start adding in plants. And I also just want to be considerate of like Chris and the pets and not have plants that are in the way. Because for me, I don't really mind too much if plants are like in the way, but I need to be thoughtful of, you know, the other people that live with me. And also I've realized over the years that I like moderate to low maintenance plants. So just nothing that requires a lot of attention and care. And then I also don't want to get anything that grows too large for the space. So for me, that means that I don't really want to add in any large aeroids. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the look of large aeroids, but they can grow really large really fast, and it's kind of like constant repotting and chopping and extending moss poles to make them look good. So I am probably not going to add any big aeroids. So like Philodendron glorious or monsteras, I probably won't add into the space just because we don't have that much room for plants like that. And I've also just been to more basic plants lately, just like simple looking plants. For example, like a plant you would find in an older person's home that's like 20 or 30 years old, like a really old begonia or an old Dracaena or something like that. So now let's talk about the plants that I currently have in my collection. So I only have 3 plants, so this won't take that long. I'm not sure the species of this. I haven't really looked into it, but it's an angel wing begonia, cane begonia that's spotted. And so this plant is really special because when we first moved into the house, my landlord, she pointed out this plant to me, and she said that this plant has been here for like over 20 years. It's been at the property for over 20 years, and that the previous homeowners had it and they grew it from like a tiny little cutting. So to her, this plant was really special, and in turn, it made it really special to me because I'm kind of sentimental with plants like that, especially when they have a history. So I don't know if you've ever seen this, but I was growing it outside and it grew so tall. It was like 8 feet tall, which was really cool. I've never seen a begonia get that tall before. And this was one of the plants that I was really sad about losing. But I remembered that I gave a cutting of it to my friend Jahao. When I went over to his apartment, I was like, wait, is that the begonia that I gave you? And then I took it back from him. And now I'm growing a cutting of it for my landlord. And she doesn't know that I have this yet. And she is going to just be so happy because, yeah, she loved this plant and loved the story of it. And so I'm really excited to see how she's going to react to it when I give it to her. It hasn't rooted yet, but I only cut it a few days ago. It doesn't look like much yet, but this is going to grow in really nicely. So this is the Spermania africana, and I had this growing outside, and I actually planted it in the ground so it would grow bigger, and then I was gonna dig it up and then put it in a pot later inside. But yeah, I love this plant because it just grows really fast and it branches on its own, and it also has these nice fuzzy leaves. I see these a lot on Pinterest in British interiors, and I haven't really seen these in the US. They don't seem like they're popular houseplants here. They just grow really fast, and I think they're a great alternative to like a ficus if you want more of a tree-like plant. It's always putting out new leaves and also putting out new growth points. And then here is this asparagus fern that my friend got for us when we first moved into the apartment. It looks really nice. We just have it sitting on our dining table. Very cute. I've always loved asparagus ferns because they look like mini trees. And then I used to have an orchid that my mom bought for me when we first moved into this apartment, but at the time, I didn't check the roots to see if they were healthy, which is what I would normally do with an orchid. But when I brought it home, I looked at the roots and it was mostly rotted and completely black. So I tried to nurse it back to health, but it ended up dying, which is quite sad. But my mom said, it's okay, I'll get you another one. Yeah, so we have 3 plants right now. Okay, now I'm gonna share my screen with you. So I made a Millinote board that I was going to include in my previous video about decorating the apartment, but I decided to make a separate plant video. So this was the Millinote board that I created that gives like my ideas for plants. Like I said, we can't have too many plants, so this is just an idea of the plants that I'm thinking of adding. Probably won't add everything. So let's start over here in the top left. So this is the African hemp, the one that I showed you. And look, you can see how it grows. Like it just grows into this nice tree. And then I have more photos here that I saved to give you a better idea of what the plant looks like, because I just don't see these in the US. So I feel like maybe y'all haven't seen it either. So this gives you an idea of what this plant looks like. And then I really want to add a platycerium. I'm just not really sure where I would put it, because I feel like platycerium, especially the more unique varieties, they look best when they have a grow light overhead, because that way the leaves grow like up and out, rather than if they're facing a window, then the leaves will grow forward and out. And I think that the up and out growth pattern looks a lot nicer for platycerium. But there is the Platycerium bifurcatum, which is this one here, that looks pretty good no matter what direction the light's facing. Like it's not very fussy. It's also the most like basic Platycerium, and it's very easy to take care of compared to other more unique varieties. So over here, these are begonias. I really like the red of begonias. Like certain begonias have red undersides, and I think it's nice to have some plants that aren't just the simple plant green color. But this one over here is actually, I believe this is a coleus, and I haven't seen these grown indoors before, at least not on Pinterest and stuff. So I don't know how well you can grow coleus indoors. If you've done it before, let me know. I know most people grow them as outdoor plants, and they grow them as annuals. So let me know if you can grow them year round in an indoor environment. But yeah, look at just how these aged begonias look. They just look so nice. This is what I mean when I say that I've been into more simple and basic plants that look like they could be 10 or 20 years old. I just think that when you have a plant for a long time, it just has a unique quality to it compared to plants that you buy fresh from a nursery. Okay, and then down here are ficus. So there's a couple different ficus species here, and these two are the Ficus umbellata. Not super popular in the US, I feel, but they are very popular in Japan. And in my experience, they grow a lot faster than Ficus elasticas or Ficus audries. So I really like them. And lately I've weirdly been into Ficus benjamina. I don't know why, I just like the smaller leaves, and it looks more like a traditional tree than any of the other ficus, which look more tropical. And I like the smaller leaves that they have, so I was thinking of maybe adding a Ficus benjamina. They're just also a lot more organic and wispy rather than, for example, the Ficus elastica, which has a very prominent structure and silhouette to it because of these like big, broad, green, kind of glossy leaves. But I do still really like Ficus elastica for that reason that I just said. And then I'm not sure exactly which ficus this is. It might be an altissima, but I don't see the variegation on it. But yeah, this is the curved ficus that they do in Japan, which I was working on, and I feel like I finally got the hang of it. It only took me like 3 or 2 years to make a ficus like that. But yep, lost that too. And then I want a vining plant. I don't know exactly which vining plant yet, but out of all of the philodendron, I feel like micans are really interesting with the velvety leaves and the darker color. And I don't know if people still grow these. I haven't seen them online in a while. They definitely had a lot of hype back in the day. So I wonder if that hype has died down and people don't really grow it anymore. But yeah, I've always really liked these ones. And then this is a Cissus rhombifolia, or also grape ivy. And I was growing this. I just started growing this in our other house, and I really like it. It looks very simple. Like I said, it looks like a basic plant, But what is really nice about these is that they create tendrils, so they're able to climb up anything that you have them growing against. So you could do like little plant hooks in the wall, or they could climb up shelves. Like, it's nice to have a plant that can naturally climb on its own, because it really settles into the space rather than the philodendron, like the vining philodendrons. They sometimes can look a bit unnatural when you try and pin them up and hang them, but the Cissus rhombifolia just looks very natural. And then this is a Rhaphidophora tetrasperma. I don't really know where I would put this one, but this is a plant that I tried to grow really early on in my plant journey, and I just failed at it, but I've always liked the look of them. So I don't know, I just added this in because I was like, maybe, but I don't really know where I'd put it. So I'm pretty sure I want a tall tree in this house. I just feel like a big statement plant is always nice to have. So these are Dracaena marginata, I believe. I don't know like what cultivar or species this one is actually, because it has all that pink. But look at that shape of it. It looks very cool. And so does this one, this Dracaena marginata. And then here is the Dracaena reflexa. Look how beautiful this plant is. Ugh. I feel like I did not appreciate it enough when I had it. But yeah. And then this is a Brachychiton rupestris. Yeah, I just think that these look nice. They have a cool shape to them. And I like that the leaves are really thin, so they don't block your sight line, and they're not like really obtrusive because you can still see through the leaves. So yeah, thinking maybe Brachychiton, I'm not sure yet. And then down here, I definitely want some type of succulent or succulents, or like caudex. So this is my old Dorstenia gigas, and it's so pretty. It actually got way bigger than this picture. Like, this is a pretty old picture, and the trunk was so much thicker. Yep, but yeah, these are all of my old pictures of my plants. I've kind of weirdly gotten into geraniums. These are, you know, typical gardening plants, but in British interiors that I've seen on Pinterest, I've seen a lot of geraniums that they grow inside, and they just have like a natural, casual, wispy growth pattern to them that I think is really appealing. Like, look at this one. And I started to get into these because I was watching a YouTube video of this book YouTuber, and I just noticed this geranium in the back. See, like, I don't know, it just caught my eye, and I was like, this looks so beautiful with that wood. And so that's when I started to get into geraniums. And he, I believe, is from the UK. Just cover him up because he did not ask to be in this video. But yeah, that's like, I'm always looking out for plants in movies and TV shows and YouTube videos and in interiors. Like, I'm always like, what plant do they have back there? And then over here too, this is just like a Pachera aquatica, a money tree. I had a fairly small money tree, but it grew really large. And I also had that plant for like 4 years, and my dad bought it for me. And so I kind of want one again. This is, I believe these are both in Japan, a bendy money tree here. But this is from a home tour that I'm a really big fan of this home tour. I'll link it down below. But they have Ficus umbellata here, and then they also have these money trees here flanking the couch. And yeah, I like how they look. They're casual, chill, and they grow pretty easily, and they can grow large pretty fast too. So now that you have an idea of what plants I'm thinking of getting, I wanted to show you my floor plan that I made, and I played around with the different locations of plants that I think could work. So let's start at the top. So this area that is behind the dining table and like in this little corner with the desk, I want to add a big tree here. I think if this space allows, I'm gonna start really slowly, so I'm gonna get like one biggish tree and then move it around to different places to see where it can fit. But I know for sure I want to have a large tree in here. And then I was thinking of adding a low table near that window and then putting my smaller plants on here. I saw a home tour on YouTube, and they had these low tables up against a window, and they had little plants on it, and I think it looked really nice. Originally, I wanted to have a low table over here near this window, and have it go across and then have plants here. But I don't think it'll work with the layout of the rug, unfortunately. Like, we just don't have enough space, and it's gonna feel really cramped. So yeah, I'm playing with the idea of having it instead near this window. And then above this desk, I'm planning to have a shelf on the wall, and I want to have a vining plant on that shelf so that way it can like climb up and also come down. So I'm thinking of doing the grape ivy there. And then over here in this corner that's made between the desk and the couch, I'm thinking of putting maybe a tree-like plant here. I'm not really sure yet because I don't know if it's gonna look odd. Like there's just a tree in the middle of the room. So that's why I'm taking it slow. I'm gonna get one tree and then play with it and see where it can fit. And then we have this media console here that has shelves on it. So we're gonna be putting the books mostly on this shelf on the wall. So I'm thinking of maybe putting a plant or two on the media console. And oh, also by the way, these windows are south-facing windows. So we get a lot of good light, luckily. So I can pretty much grow anything that doesn't need really intense light. And then over here, this is the sliding black console. I'm thinking of putting a few plants here. So it's gonna be fairly empty, this black console, because we're gonna have sconces above it. And then I wanna keep the surface fairly empty. So I'm thinking it could be a nice space to group a good amount of plants, because if you're gonna have a lot of plants, I think it's best to group them in one area. So that's what I may do. I need to feel it out though, because I don't want it to be too plant crazy in here. And then I was also thinking we could have a tree or a tall plant next to the lounge chair that we're gonna have, because I think it's nice to have either like an end table or a floor lamp or a plant next to a lounge chair just to group it with something. Like it's nice when there's something around the lounge chair. So those are my plant plans for this apartment, and I hope you enjoyed my little backstory, and hopefully that gives you a better idea of, you know, my journey with plants and how I'm approaching them now. I feel like a lot of you also were on a similar path where you were like super into plants and growing hundreds of plants, and then you curated your collection down to a more livable and sustainable collection. Oh, by the way, I will be going to Vietnam in about 2 weeks. I'm so excited, and I will probably vlog it. I'm not entirely sure yet. It just depends on how I'm feeling, honestly. So yeah, I'm going to Vietnam. I can't wait. I just love Vietnam. Okay, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.